All right, now we're on E and F. And we'll look at this again in our example paper. We're going to do both E and F because they put them together in theirs, but we have the intended population. We got a little bit of that in the introduction. And then the variables of interest, including their types and any confounding variables. So let's go take a look at their E and F. So here, again, intended population and variables, they're making it very clear that yes, they have this portion there. And let's just real quick, just kind of see what they needed to get to theirs. It looks like they took 2 pages. Again, that's probably about right, 2 or 3 pages to talk about your variables and your intended population. Again, it depends a little bit on your question, but let's take a look. So the study will consist of participants that are representative of the general collegiate student body population. Well, now there I take a little exception to that in that they told us they're just going to look at Lindsey Wilson College students. And well, is that really the general collegiate student body population? Not so sure. Okay, so I think they've got a little bit of a problem there with how, what they think they're doing or what population they think they're working with versus what population they really are talking about working with. I would say if you worked with some sort of data collection, a survey or just got school records from different schools, and you had a nice sampling of NCAA Division I, Division II, Division III, and NAIA schools, all 4 of those types, large schools, small schools, all of that, then I would say, state schools, private schools. Then I would say representative of a general collegiate student body. With Lindsey Wilson, I would say, well, it's representative of probably the word elite would be okay. Elite NAIA private college. Again, you might have to look at various colleges, but I think that wouldn't be bad. NAIA private school. Probably any results you get from Lindsey could be applied to most of those schools, but I definitely wouldn't say the general collegiate student body population. Not with the way they at least in their introduction. We're talking about just getting data from Lindsey. Okay, so again, a very specific question: whether improvement in involvement in athletics enhances or hinders academic achievement. So there, they restated the question, keeping us on track that way. We're going to have 2 groups, they say, that are very similar with just one exception. Okay, so here they are starting to talk about variables and confounders, but sort of on the down low, I guess I would say, right? Because they're saying we need to have these 2 groups, but they need to be similar in every way except one, okay? And they should just differ by whether the people are members of athletic teams or not. And otherwise, the group should be just the same. That makes a lot of sense. Now, one doesn't have to do that, but again, that's where the confounding comes in. So the more you make them similar, the less you probably think, even when you do identify confounding variables, that they would really have a whole lot to do with things, although they could. And so this is just good. They're saying they're trying to make them similar. Now the question is, how are they going to do this? How are they going to make them similar? Let's see if they answer that. Okay. So here they only differ whether they're athletic team or not. This is the explanatory or predictor variable of the study, involvement in a sports team. Then the associated response variable. Now I probably wouldn't use the word associated, but I would just say the response variable is the measurement of academic achievement, grade point average. Determining whether there is a dependency between these two variables is difficult due to several external influences. Okay, so those other influences, the confounding variables. So they're pointing out that, hey, it's not as simple as just looking at that. Then and then they just put it, you don't really need such a statement. Supposedly we all know this, but it doesn't hurt. Neglecting possible confounding variables could yield inaccurate results. Okay. Okay, so there are several variables that have to be accounted for. Let's see what they mention. A few of the possible confounding variables were considered when conducting the study. So they mentioned gender. Yeah, that's a very good one. Because with gender, pretty much there are lots and lots of studies that show females tend to have higher GPAs than males, especially in college. Athletic organization, so again, things like NAIA, NCAA, that kind of thing. Socioeconomic status, high school education. So again, not all students come in with the same preparation, so that could matter. Academic year, yeah, freshmen tend to have lower GPAs than seniors. The major, certainly some majors probably have a little lower GPAs than others. The health of the individuals, right? If you have, most of your athletes are probably pretty healthy, if you get injuries, of course. The non-athletes, they could have various health issues, chronic health issues that just affect their studies, and so that may matter. And then additional extracurricular involvement. So are you on student council? Are you in the band? Are you in the choir? What other things are you doing? And so those all seem like good ones, and they could go forever. I mean, they could just keep asking more and more and more, but you got to stop somewhere, and these all seem like pretty good ones. Let's see. So here they just kind of go on with the gender part, males, females. And now I probably wouldn't say opposing sex, I would probably say opposite sex, but even there I would probably just leave it with male and females. Okay, so they mention all these, and then they also now talk about the sports team. So they mentioned some of these possible confounding variables, and now they look at some of them more specifically. So they just use one sentence on the gender. That's kind of all I said as well. I just said, well, there are studies that show females have higher GPAs. And well, okay, now I said that. It would be nice to go find a reference that you can cite that says, yes, that's true. They didn't do that. That's a problem. Okay, so here they didn't really have the justification they should have. Now, in that sense, they were kind of weak on it though too, is they said it is possible that. Okay, well, so sure, it's possible that, and you could say they don't need a reference. Well, a much stronger statement would be that females tend to have higher GPAs than males, as cited by, right? You know, I mean, you put a reference there and put that in your list of references, and that would make this a stronger, more complete paper. Certain sports, worse or better GPAs, yeah, certainly, and I don't think the fact when you mention stereotypes, that necessarily needs a reference there. But, you know, they mentioned country club sports like golf, tennis, swimming, versus maybe others. Now, and that's what they're calling athletic organization, is the sports team. Well, I think they could have used a better word than athletic organization, but I see what they mean here now. And these three organizations are known to have better GPAs. Oh, now that needs a reference, because they are making a statement that this is true. Well, I don't know that's true. Where's your reference to point that out? How do we know that's true? And so they really should have a reference there. Socioeconomic status. So you see they're just going through these different pieces. They mention the variables, and then they're taking a moment to talk about each one. They probably, you know, I think the females was fine. They maybe, I think, needed to say a little bit more here than these two sentences, and they definitely needed a reference here. And again, up here, they could have used a reference. Socioeconomic status is the underlying reasons for this trend. Oh, now see, again, they're saying, hey, they've got a reason. That needs a reference. I mean, how do you know that? And you know, and so they need a reference to talk about these things with socioeconomic status and the different sports. But again, socioeconomic status, there are plenty of studies that show higher socioeconomic status also tends to go with higher achievement in schools and all that, and therefore, yeah, find a reference that mentions that. And you know, and they say thus typically those in the country club sports. Well, yeah, they need a little more here if they want to tie those two things together. But definitely references on those to say where they know that that's the case. Here they go on with wrestling and football as the non-country club sports and so forth. And they talk about why there might be a lower socioeconomic status there. Again, but they're sort of mixing two things, and that's okay. But I'm not sure they really realize they're mixing those two things, and they should either point out that they are or not mix them, because those are two different variables: the sport a person plays and their socioeconomic status, but they may somehow mix together. And then now here they're addressing the confounder of class as saying, well, they're only going to look at juniors and seniors above 60 hours of college credit, and scored at the 75th percentile on the ACT or higher. Okay, and now what are they doing there? They go to explain it here is that those were confounders, and they could do a little better job tying them in, but those are confounders they mentioned somewhere up here. Yeah, here we go. High school education, academic year, and so high school education academic year, well, they limit it to juniors and seniors, so that shouldn't be as big a problem because now you don't really have that variable. In other words, they've taken it down to a particular level, and then they tried to make sure everybody was scoring pretty high, and so they took that confounder out of there a bit too, you know, and it makes people look more alike and that sort of thing. And so that's how they're handling a couple of these confounding variables, is just by limiting the population so that they don't really vary at least not that much. And here they try to justify what they're doing, due to the equal intelligence level being sampled. Now, I might say that a little differently, because I don't know that ACT and intelligence are quite the same thing. But they're really getting at academic preparation. What was their high school academic achievement and that sort of thing. And the ACT is a pretty good guide to that, SAT as well. And so that's what they're getting at, and they're trying to explain that here. And so that's a good thing. They now talk about, incoming freshmen, making adjustments and so forth. They just don't want to mess with all that. And so they're justifying why they only want to look at upperclassmen. They don't know if it would matter. They don't know for a fact it would matter, but they're guessing it might, and so let's just take that out. Okay? So they explain that. And then they mention, across different majors. Previous research shows that data provides convincing that it's different grade point between majors. Need a reference, right? No reference there. So they're getting hit hard on references as we go through this. But otherwise, they're doing a pretty nice job. They're taking the time to address each of their confounding variables and how they're going to deal with it. And that sort of thing. And so they were pretty weak on the population, right? That was back here. They only addressed that a little bit, and they were pretty weak on that, so that wasn't so good. But it's there. And then they have all this on the variables and confounding variables. Now, something they missed, never do they seem to tell me what types of variables these are, right? Gender, that's categorical. GPA, that's numerical. Never did they say that. So they missed that. Now, they may mention it later down here, and that would be fine when they do, if they do. But so far, I just want to point out from what's mentioned here, variables of interest and confounding variables include the variable types. They have not yet done the variable types, but they've done a good job on F. The intended study, they put it in, but I don't think they did a very good job on that population and explaining, they didn't really justify why asking Lindsey Wilson College students these questions would be representative of all college athletes and non-athletes. That just didn't do it for me. Okay, so they were pretty weak on E here, but they did a pretty nice job on F. Just they did not give us the variable types. Okay, so that's E and F. So we've made it that far.